Negro, who was an Englishman that married a Spanish woman, and under Castilian law, even today, the man takes the woman's last name. So they had a 2,000-acre land grant here, and he built the house as a trading post for this Choctaw village that encompassed about a 3-square-mile area here. Archaeologists say that it's possible that between 9 and 15,000 Native Americans lived here at any one time for about 4,000 years. They dated the pottery and the airheads and things that's been picked up on the site to about 2,000 years before Christ. So anyway, the Spanish government didn't want the British to have Florida, so they gave it to the United States in 1798. Well, the house was built in 1792. John Ford had an uncle named John Ford, and he was a land agent for the U.S. government, and his office was right near the Assembly Hall in Washington, just north of Natchez. So Joseph gets here, his brother, about 1804, and he gets a land grant from his uncle for about 28,000 acres. So that's a lot, and this was part of it. It just got kind of lumped in. Well, he writes his brother a letter, and his brother at that time was a state senator in South Carolina, and says, hey, you need to come over here. There's souls to be saved. You know, I've got a place that's right in the middle of a huge native, and there's money to be made in Mississippi. So John leaves South Carolina, and he gets to Atmore, Alabama, up around Huntsville, and he stays there for about a year. And he leaves there, and he gets in a boat, a flatboat, and he goes up the Tennessee River to the Cumberland River. You got to remember now, he's going to Natchez. So he goes north to the Cumberland River and the Tennessee River, and he floats down to the Mississippi River. Well, they get in the Mississippi River, and he gets within about 30 miles of Natchez at Bayou Pierre and gets out of the boat. And we don't know if that's where the boat was going and it stopped, or if he got tired of being on the water, or if he was a Joe Biden supporter and he didn't know where he was at. But for some reason, he gets out and walks the rest of the way to Natchez. Well, he stays in Natchez till 1809, and in 1809, we've got the records. He bought 60 slaves at the Natchez slave auction on a Wednesday, which a lot of people don't know why things in the South close on Wednesday afternoons. Everybody say, well, that's for church. That's what I always thought too. It's not for church. The slave auction started at 1 o'clock on Wednesday in most of the little towns that had slave markets. So that's why everything, it got to be a habit. Everything shut down, not necessarily for the slave auction, but so people could go do business on Wednesday afternoon. Because most things, well, all things then were closed on Sunday, and a lot of them were closed on Saturday also. So John Ford gets here in 1809, and he's having a nice old time. These porches are not here. The house goes straight up. It was only the brick on the bottom. There was not a porch on the front or the back of the house at that time. It was built without them. And these windows stopped about right here. And they had shutters on them with firing ports where you could shoot out. And those shutters were about that tall. This fireplace on this end of the house is newer than the fireplace on that end of the house. Now, I don't know how much newer. We know that the fireplace on this end of the house is about 14 inches taller than the fireplace on the other end of the house. When you get inside and look, you can also see where the fireplaces were repaired over the years. The 1936 photos, this fireplace is almost falling down. So when the Historical Society got the house in '63, they got some money in the '70s, and they stabilized that fireplace by pouring brick around it and then coming on the outside, or by pouring concrete on it and coming on the outside and laying a new layer of brick around the original fireplace. So that's why the fireplace on this end is a little bit bigger than the fireplace on the other end. You see that a lot up in New England, on the East Coast where houses are a lot older. I've seen chimneys that had as many as 7 other chimneys added to them just to stabilize what was already there to keep from tearing it down and having to rebuild a chimney. So John Ford's here and everything's going good, and then in 1813 we have the Creek War. Yes, ma'am. You got a question? Okay. You can ask questions, just feel free. But anyway, the Creeks massacre Fort Mims, kill all the settlers and the few troops that were there. And that starts the Creek War. Well, we were already in the middle of the war, 1812. So Governor Holmes writes John Ford a letter and orders him to build a fort around the house. That little rise out there was where the fort wall went all the way around the house, about 50 feet out. The fort wall, you know in the movies, all the fort walls standing straight up like this. They got little nice little points on them. When you built an actual fort wall, you built a fort wall that was about 30 degrees slope towards the outside. Who knows why? It's hard to climb. It's hard to climb like this. If it's straight up, you can throw a ladder on it and jump right over it. But ropes and stuff, you don't have anything to prop up against if there's an angle on the wall. Fort Loudon in Tennessee is built like the fort that was here. It's a lot bigger, but the walls are built the same way. We don't know when they tore the wall down, but we know that it was gone by the time, or the Rankins may have taken it down by the mid-1800s. Andrew Jackson comes through in 1814, headed to New Orleans for what? To fight the British and keep them from occupying New Orleans. So he's headed to what would become the Battle of New Orleans. He comes from Mobile to Fort Stoddard, which is in Alabama now, across about where Camp Shelby is, on the mail road, and comes here. The mail road went from Mobile to Fort Stoddard, from Fort Stoddard to Ford's Fort, from Ford's Fort to Knoxville, from Knoxville to Holmesville, from Holmesville to Liberty, and then at Liberty it turned and went through what is now, not Goss, I can't ever think of the name of that place, but it starts with a G. Anyway, it comes out at Washington, just north of Natchez. So he gets here and he wants to spend the night. Well, he's the complete opposite from Reverend Ford. He drinks, he cusses, he smokes, he womanizes, he shoots people over women. He's a complete opposite of a preacher. But they become fast friends, and he lets him stay in the house as long as he doesn't drink or swear in the house, and he agrees to have prayer with the family that night. So he stays here. He goes to Battle of New Orleans, wins the Battle of New Orleans. He doesn't come back through here. In 1816, he does come back here when they were settling or verifying where the 35th parallel is to make the state line. And he comes to protect the surveyors, not from Indians, but he comes to protect the surveyors from the militia in what was then the Republic of West Florida. They were British sympathizers, and they had not given up yet. So they occupied south of the line. Now a lot of that was still on Ford land. The Fords got it in a land grant, so we don't know, we don't have a record of any conflict, but Jackson stayed here 22 days at that time, and they corresponded profusely throughout the rest of Reverend Ford's life. Reverend Ford dies in 1826, and his wife has the porch on the front of the house, which is on the riverside, added that year. About 1846, she sells the home to William Rankin, and she moves with her children over to Greensburg, Louisiana, which is out off of 55. You'll see a sign for it. She's buried in a cemetery over there. John Ford is not buried in Mississippi, so if you get a letter from Ann Simmons wanting money to dig John Ford up, she can't dig him up in Mississippi because he's not buried here. He's buried in the Ard family cemetery, and the congressional record is very clear about that. John Ford was a congressional delegate when they had the Pearl River Convention to separate Alabama and Mississippi and make Mississippi a state. He was Mississippi's representative that was sent to Washington. So there's very clear records about where he is. If you go about 3.5 miles down this road out here, which will turn into the old East Columbia Road going to Varnado, about halfway between Varnado and Angie, there's a cemetery on the left. You can't see the cemetery. There's 2 brick columns, and it says Sweet Home Cemetery. He's buried in that cemetery. That is the Ard family cemetery. And the Ards were his in-laws. That's where their place was. So we know where the 2 Fords are buried. We don't know exactly which grave he's buried in because it says he was buried in an unmarked grave. I guess he had some enemies and they didn't want him dug up. But somebody has dug up about half of that cemetery on the far end. Looks like with heavy equipment. In 1958, the floor in the kitchen was dirt because Brenda Powell had her honeymoon in this house. Aunt Claire let her have her honeymoon in the house. And we got pictures of her in 58, and the floor was still dirt in here. There was a pump where that hole is right behind you, so you would have water even if the house was closed up. All of the furniture in the house is original to the house, except for this piece of furniture and these folding chairs. Folding chairs came out of the church. This piece of furniture dates to about 1830. Francis Warren gave me that piece of furniture and I put it in the house because I wanted 4 tables in here. When the Spanish had it, it was probably used kind of like a trading post in a tavern. They didn't have stairs, they had ladders that they pulled up in case the Indians attacked. Indians are not stupid. I'm sure if they would have attacked, they would have just built a big fire down here and burned everybody on the side and blows up. But you know, white people thought Indians didn't think like that back then.
Basically a skirmish. We got some Yankees out there that are going through the countryside and they are looking for what they can steal. And they are going to walk into a surprise attack. They're not going to know that this is a Confederate cannon because you see we have the flag hidden. We're going to open up on them. We're going to put our flag up, and then they are going to attack. Now, normally we would have a lot more people out here, but because of the impossible heat that we have had this year, a lot of people didn't show up. We're glad y'all came. We hope that you will enjoy it, and after it's over, feel free to talk to any of the reenactors. We're here to answer questions. We'll show you our camps. And yes, we did sleep out here last night. And will again tonight. So y'all enjoy.
It's gonna be loud, you better cover your ears.
When is he gonna shoot it?
Keep it for fire starters.
Load! Big clear! They're secure! Pass around!
It will bend your spine. Carson, come here.
Carson, come here, baby.
Come here, baby. Well, he's got to stick your fingers in your ears so Kyle get up over here. Come right here, baby. Look, you're right here. Sit right here and put your fingers in your ears. Stick your fingers in your ears. It's going to be loud.
Here come the Yankees. Fire! Who's the wheel, Pat?
Wasn't me.
I know. Fire 4 rounds. Back to the ball.
Y'all going to have to move it.
Pass around. Kill us all? Kill them. Some of them not getting Pull back Clear!
I'm gonna have to move this dang chuck wagon out the way.
Hey, steady.
That's right.
I'm gonna fart on them.
They good. You fry them?
Double canister.
Oh, no.
If that rains a double canister, there would be nothing left but a bloody mess out in front of that tunnel.
That's how we got the chicken this morning.
It's really a crew.
That's right. Turn it a little bit.
Stick them in there.
That's Major Mom.
Well, you don't have to. Well, who lives over there? Over there?
No, that is the guy that sold the house that's on 76th Street. Granddaughter and her husband have a truck. But they own all of them. If it had live round in it, it'd shoot about 2 miles. But with a blank charge in it, I took a mountain house to